Hello and welcome to Season 2 of the Motivational Millennial Podcast. I'm Blake Brandis.
I'm Ivy LeClaire.
Yay! We made it!
To Season 2?
To Season 2.
Oh,
And this far in our lives. Nothing's guaranteed. I'm glad we're here. I'm glad you're here listening to us, wonderful friend, listener, human.
Yeah, me too. So we wanted to start off this season with a little bit of an intro and to give you an overview of some of the changes that we've made. We reached out to all you listeners and we heard back. And so we're responding to some of the feedback that we've gotten. Instead of doing an interview and then an after show in 1 hour-long episode, we are actually going to split those two things into 2 episodes over 2 weeks. So, for example, we'll do an interview next week. You'll hear that. And then the following week, you will hear our big takeaways and our discussion show. So it'll rotate from an interview where Blake and I will be interviewing an awesome millennial. And then the next week will be Blake and I discussing different topics and takeaways from that particular interview.
Yes. And hopefully that will give you a more concise, condensed chunk to listen to every week. So you don't have to feel the pressure of finishing an hour-long episode every week.
Yeah, and we're pretty excited about it too, because we're going to be creating, 20 to 30 minute long episodes where Blake and I will be discussing. So we're going to be bringing in outside perspectives in addition to the perspective of the interviewee. And we're going to be bringing in some of our own stuff. So it'll be a little bit longer than the after shows were. We have not yet decided what we're going to call that portion, but I have faith that it will come out. After show seems weird because it's like a week after. A week after show.
Very far after show.
That sounds like week like W-E-A-K.
Yo.
A week after show.
Y'all are just delivering a bunch of week after shows this season. They're not living up to the promise of the insight.
Yeah, so we wanted to just give you a heads up, especially, if you're totally new to the podcast, just to let you know what's going on. And also, we wanted to share a little bit about how we've grown personally. That's what we're into over here is growth, transformation, challenges. What have we had to do to overcome them and how have we grown? So Blake, I'd love to hear, what is the biggest way that you feel like you've grown since the end of season 1?
Great question. Thank you for asking. So
Thank you. You are so welcome.
So at the beginning of the podcast, episode 000, 2 zeros, 3, whatever. The very first episode where you and I were introducing the podcast at the very beginning, I talked about how I didn't want my life to be a series of to-do lists. And I think over the course of season 1, one of the ways I grew the most was by actually dropping the to-do list, because what I realized was the to-do list was this secret perfectionist weapon that I was using to say, okay, here's the order I have to do everything in my life, and this is the most important thing, which is what you're supposed to do, right? You're supposed to prioritize the stuff you want to do in your life. But because I then thought, okay, I have to do this in the exact order, and if I'm not doing it, I'm failing, I would constantly set myself up for disappointment because I would stress myself out and say, okay, I know this is the most important thing I have to do right now, and so I'm going to do everything else except for that thing. So that was season 1, the growth. Between season 1 and 2, I had this realization actually 2 weeks ago, but it's been building. And it all came about because I've been doing motivational speaking in schools for a long time now, like 15 years. And before every single time I talk, I get so nervous and I just think, oh, I got to get this right. And I don't want to let the people down. I want to give the students a great experience. I want to give the principal and the teachers a great experience. And what I finally realized 2 weeks ago was I have a choice about whether I stress out before each of these assemblies. Like before each speaking engagement, I could choose to say, you know what, I'm not going to worry about this. I'm going to rehearse for sure, but I'm going to have fun. I can look at this as a fun experience versus something I have to do and I don't want to mess it up. And I've done the past 3 assemblies that way at 3 different schools across California. And it's been amazing. I've had so much fun. The students have had so much fun. And they haven't gone all according to script exactly. One of them I had half the time I thought I was going to, so I had to condense it. But all that to say, it was a great experience and I loved it. And all the things I would have worried about didn't come to pass. And the stuff I hadn't even anticipated, like only having half the time available, it was fine. I worked with it. The kids had a great time. And so it's just been this major change for me about we always have a choice how we approach everything in our lives. And it feels like we don't. But if you really start analyzing it, I think you actually might. And it reminds me, as my closing comment, of something you've been sharing recently, this idea of living in a story of overcoming, like a struggle story. Like, oh, life is just struggle. I got to overcome, struggle and overcome, versus a great story in which you are the protagonist and you are driving the narrative of your life. So that's some of my growth. What's been going on for you, Ivy?
Yeah, it's so interesting that you bring that up because and I hadn't thought about what I said in episode 000 or whatever it was until again just now, but one of the things that I remember speaking about is feeling shame around being happy.
Mhm.
And how one of the things that I wanted for myself and for others is to live joyfully, to live in a way where you're like really excited about life and to feel, I guess it comes down to feeling like you deserve it,
Mm.
feeling like you're worthy of that, and that just because you are happy doesn't mean that you are making other people unhappy, or if your happiness makes other people unhappy, just knowing that that's like not your responsibility, So it's like all of these many layers. And, it comes to mind for me right now because I started recently a training program called the Great Story, coaching program, which is where you've been hearing some of that language from. And the three stories that they talk about that we all have are the victim story, which is feeling like we have no control over our circumstances. We have no control over how we approach our circumstances, that life is happening to us and we are a victim of life. And we've all had moments like that, or we all still have moments like that. And they often originate from some kind of traumatic or something event that happened in adolescence. And then we have the overcoming story, which is the proving yourself. Like, I'm going to show you that I can do this. I am going to prove that I can overcome whatever challenge or setback or something that's like, for me, to be more specific, for me, it was about proving that I was going to live a very productive life, that I was going to be able to get rid of my anxiety, like, and that I was going to be super successful and just like proving. And, the overcome story is it's really exciting in a lot of ways. I mean, it's what our television shows are based on, and all of this, like, there's some kind of crazy challenge, and then you overcome it, and then the episode ends usually with some other challenge, like, that's like the cliffhanger, that's the next thing. And so when you live constantly in an overcome story, it's like permanent struggle. And you never actually are getting to the place where you are in the flow of life.
Mhm.
And like you said, that was a great way to put it. Like, like your truest, highest self is the protagonist of your life.
Mm.
And that you are, the way it's described in this program is, that it's like the moment when life becomes truly magical because you are still growing, you are still becoming and achieving and living out this fulfilling life, but it's happening easier. It's happening with flow and through connection to each other and to the universe. And, rather than forcing, reality to bend to your will, that's like, as I'm in this program, I'm like, wow, I've been doing that forever. And so, it all kind of ties together that a little over a year ago, that was one of the things that I was thinking about was getting to that place of just happiness and being okay with being happy and like enjoying it. I think a great metaphor for this is going from the overcome story to the great story, or struggle to happiness. It's like I have been in a tunnel my whole life, and I've, like, seen this light at the end of the tunnel, like, I believe in the hope, I know that it's there, but it's like, I just keep trying to get to the light and out of the light, like, always, just perpetually, and it just keeps getting farther away, and then I get close and it goes farther away. That's the overcoming story, because the thing that needs to change for me to step out into the light, step out from the tunnel and into the light, has nothing to do with my external circumstances and 100% to do with the way that I view myself and my life and everything. The only thing that's keeping me in the tunnel has been myself.
I love that.
That's been the biggest way that I've grown since the end of season 1, because you know this, Blake, but but our listeners don't know this, but I've had generalized anxiety disorder since I was, in middle school, and I'm 30 now, so it's been quite a while. And for years, I mean, I just wanted to get rid of it because I didn't think that I could be happy, and I didn't think I could love myself or any of that if I just never had any anxiety again in my life. And in the summer, in between our seasons, I had some pretty huge flare-ups happening. Like, I would have a really successful event in the business, and then the next day I'd have a really bad anxiety attack that would last, knock me out for like 3 days. Long story short, I decided to go back, and I really felt I made an empowered choice to go back to therapy. I made an empowered choice to go on a 7-day meditation retreat and open myself up to some self-compassion and to acceptance. And when I went back to therapy, the thing that I said to this person was that, "You know what? My goal isn't to fix this. My goal isn't to make it go away. My goal is to accept it and to love myself even in the midst of anxiety. Because if I can meet my anxiety with love and acceptance rather than shame, it's a completely different experience of life."
I love that perspective for a couple reasons. One is it's so much nicer to live life like that, right? Like to live life being kind to yourself. And secondly, it's such an empowered place. And I love what you said. It's not about your external circumstances being different, it's about the way you approach yourself and who you are in this story of your life. And to me, it sounds like such a mirror of the experience I was sharing earlier, which is
Mhm.
my circumstances didn't change. I still had to deal with stuff going wrong and things not working out as planned. Even I even showed up at a school. There's a scheduling mishap, and I actually didn't get to present the assembly on that day. But it was such a good reminder that I could have spent the previous 12 hours stressing about it, only to show up and have it not matter at all. Or I could have had the previous 12 hours being self affirming and just in a flow state, like you're describing. And then it could have happened that we did the presentation or not, but the experience of life would have been so different. And I think that's what I love that you're getting at is your experience of life in the midst of things going wrong, things not going as planned, can still be this centered, empowered place. So, what do you feel is possible for you from this place of acceptance of anxiety versus constantly fighting it or constantly feeling the shame around it?
Well, I do wanna just make a caveat and say that, like, because it sounds like as we're talking right now, like, this just sounds like a really easy thing to do. I just think it's about the reality of taking responsibility for your reality, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and so I just think it's empowering for me to realize that it's my responsibility to step into the light and out of the tunnel, and that the only thing that's been keeping me there is me
Hmm.
and what I think I'm capable of and what I think the world is about and people are about, and just my personal views. So, wow, isn't that empowering? All I have to do is just let go of all of these deeply ingrained limiting beliefs and,
All I have to
all the
do.
conditioning for the past 30 years. So it's empowering because it's like, wow. And like that you're having this shared human experience, that everybody is experiencing this kind of thing too. But it's also really hard, it's really scary, and it's kind of sad. When you have those moments, when you kind of have a big epiphany or realization of when you've done this kind of work, you look at ways in which you've treated yourself poorly in the past, not to shame yourself for it, but just a realization, of just patterns of treating yourself. And you're like, that's sad. It's saddening, So
Mhm.
you've got to honor not just the empowering, triumphant side of that realization, but also the emotions that are less pleasant, which are some sadness or some regret. And knowing that I can see that, and it's a practice though. So when you say what's possible now that you see that with anxiety, I've seen it, but I've never applied it to anxiety before. And
Mhm.
I think that's one thing about mental health in my own personal experience and some research that I've done is that like there's an element of the mental health that's physical and that we really can't control. But I also think that sometimes we feel more powerless than we really are, particularly with anxiety and, like that we can take empowered action in service of ourselves from our highest self that helps minimize the symptoms of anxiety and things.
I appreciate that clarification because you're right. It's certainly not a switch that you flip and then suddenly I'm enlightened. Everything
I
is
know,
easy.
and
It's
neither of us think that, but I just wanted to
yeah.
make sure that it was clear to our listeners that like we're advocating that, but also knowing that we have to acknowledge that it's gonna be hard. Wouldn't that be great? I wish it was this. I
Yeah.
wish I could listen to like one podcast and then be like, "Oh, my life has changed forever. I
Flip the
get
Buddha switch.
everything. I'm enlightened now."
That's right. Ding, Buddha. So, no, you're right. And it is a process. And I think that's an important thing to realize is it's not that you automatically do this. It's that you can increasingly be aware
Hmm.
of when you're telling yourself a certain story or going into certain thought patterns or certain behaviors. And that is certainly my experience. It's not that I suddenly flipped the switch and was like, "Wee, now everything's fun all the time." It's more that I just started noticing.
Right.
And that's the power to your point about the tunnel, because the tunnel's unconscious so often. Like we're not even
Hmm.
aware of it.
Right.
Like I wasn't even I've been doing this, yeah, for 30, I've been alive for 33 years. I've been doing this, stuff for 15 years. I had never even realized that I might have a choice.
Yeah,
Like,
I
isn't that mind blowing?
understand.
Like,
Yeah.
I could spend a decade and a half of my life being like, I have a choice about a lot of other stuff, but this, this is just who I am. It's how I feel. And it's like, whoa. And to your point, it was kind of sad because I was like, wow, I've caused myself a lot of unnecessary
Yeah.
suffering over the years.
Yeah.
But I think that's helpful too, because that sadness is hopeful and empowering because it's like, I don't have to live like this anymore.
Yeah. And it's also kind of just sad.
Sure.
Like I think that it's also really important that as we're like being aware of our emotions and having compassion and acceptance of our emotions, that our good emotions or our pleasant emotions and it's like good and bad, but pleasant emotions versus unpleasant emotions the same, and we don't need to dilute either one. Sometimes it's just hard, and allowing ourselves to feel whatever emotion is actually the pathway to freeing it, because you could hold on to this sadness and then beat yourself up over it.
Sure.
Then you're just trapping yourself into the tunnel even more.
Yeah. You're absolutely right, because you have a choice once you feel whatever you're feeling. You can either beat yourself up or acknowledge it, honor it, and then say, now what can I do from here? And I think that for me has been something that's really helped me a lot. And it took a long time to develop, and I don't always do it perfectly, but it's whenever I am feeling upset or sad or frustrated to feel it, like you're saying, because I used to just try not to feel it at all, and that's a great way to repress all your emotions, become a little ball of anger, secret repressed anger. I'm so happy all the time. So it's to your point, it's about acknowledging the emotion and then saying, "What can I do with this?" Like, and that for me is the shift where I don't get stuck in it as much as I used to, because I would get in that spiral of I'm sad, now I'm angry, that I'm sad, now I'm sad, that I'm angry, and I'm angry, that I'm sad. You do that little spiral over and over, but punching out from that and saying, okay, I feel sad right now. I feel angry right now. That's fine. That's normal, right? Now I am where I am. What has happened has happened. Where do we go from here? And I did a post recently. I think I said the choice is like get mad or move forward. And so it's like once you feel the emotion, do you get mad at yourself or at the other person or whatever and say, oh, this is what happened, shouldn't have happened, blah, blah, anger? Or do you like immediate acceptance, which is the goal? And it's so hard to do.
Yeah, but that's where practice comes in. And it takes a lot of bravery and courage to say, I have authority and authorship and responsibility for the outcome of my life and for the outcome of my day.
That's why I don't like the new Taylor Swift song. Look what you made me do. No one made you do anything, Taylor. You're the author of your destiny. Sorry.
It's like that one song about, oh, waiting for the world to change. What's that?
John Mayer.
John Mayer. He annoys me. I'm sorry. John Mayer, if for some bizarre reason you're listening to this episode, let's have you on the show sometime.
Hey, John. I like your music a lot. We don't have to talk about your personal life. Anyway,
we should talk about your personal life because I don't like your songs. No, it's just that, you know, that one, like, but I feel similarly when I was hearing that song when it came out, it just felt like you kind of had no agency whatsoever. That's what it felt like when I'm listening to that song.
Right. And if there's a question of institutional systematic forces that are shaping our world, yes, some of those are certainly beyond our immediate control, but you always have control of your immediate locus of action.
Oh, and do you know what this reminds me of? A perspective that someone gave me in the networking group that I go to. She was sharing that just like the health of each of our cells is important for the overall health of our body, it's like each individual human and each individual human's health is important for the overall health of humanity, right? So the whole talk that she did was about self-love. So I mean, really, it is important when you have that sense of agency and, you know.
Well, that's a great metaphor, and this is going to stretch it a little bit, but we've had some hurricanes recently, and if you think about sort of the nation as a giant organism, to your point, we all make up cells of it, there's sort of this giant immune system response of everyone flooding in, volunteers, money, everyone coming in to help this part of our nation that's been really hurt. And so that extends well, it is the body politic, obviously, is a metaphor that already exists, but it's that sort of idea at scale. It's that we see something, we help, hopefully, or if we're in need, if something outside of our control or even within our control has happened to us, we hope other people will also step in to help us. So we're not alone, I guess is what I'm saying, either in the struggle, but also we're not alone in the help. And sometimes the most empowered thing to do is to ask for help. I think sometimes there's this myth or misconception about the stuff we're talking about that's like, you need to be a totally self-reliant individual and you've got this all figured out in your head and you're so empowered and you don't need anything, you're just a fully complete human. But it's like, no, we're all in a relationship with each other, we're all in community with each other.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. But I think, we do spend time emphasizing community and tribe in the work that we're doing too.
Yeah, and that's the Motivational Millennial was about that. It was about saying you're not alone.
It's because understanding common humanity and like feeling connected to other people and to source, if that feels good to you, like all of those things like really create a sense of peace and validation and empowerment that's really important. So we couldn't do what we're doing without it. And I'm really excited to be exploring the work that I'm doing now, which is supporting people with anxiety who have big dreams and big goals, or they're wanting to create their own business or make an impact in their community, and are also experiencing anxiety and the self-sabotage and the shame and all of these things that can come with experiencing it. How do we, one, come together and support each other in a common understanding of that particular human experience? And then also, how do we hold ourselves as strong and hold each other as strong and empowered to create the life that we want, to still experience fulfillment and happiness and joy, even if the anxiety comes back, even if it's there, and to meet whatever bouts of anxiety with that compassion. And that's going to, community is going to be an important part of that.
Yeah, I think that's such important and powerful work, especially because you have such deep firsthand experience with what it feels like to struggle with anxiety and also at the same time pursue what you love, and to share that with other people to support them in their journey. And to your earlier point, that it's not about fixing people, it's not about cutting out part of yourself, it's about embracing who you are and saying, I am great with anxiety.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been a great conversation and
Yeah.
intro. I was gonna say session. That's not the intro episode. I
It's
have sessions on the brain from coaching, I guess.
it's like a session. It's like a talking session.
Session. Yeah, it's been a great conversation. I've enjoyed it. I hope that all of you amazing listeners have enjoyed it as well. Please join us next week for our first interview episode. We're pretty excited about that. We have someone awesome lined up for you, and it was a really good conversation.
Yes. Here's a little hint. He's ultra spiritual.
Wonderful.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. It's great to be back with you for season 2, and we can't wait to rock out with you more in the year ahead.
Rock on. For show notes and previous episodes, or to learn more about our coaching and event offerings, visit motivationalmillennial.com. That's millennial, MILLENNIAL. Keep in touch with us at facebook.com/motivationalmillennial.
We'd love to hear from you. Shoot us an email with your thoughts, comments, and suggestions at podcast@motivationalmillennial.com. And tell us who you might like to hear from, or if you think you or anyone you know would be good for the show.
Our theme music was composed and performed by our very own Blake Brandis.
The Motivational Millennial Podcast is edited by Brittany Felix. Have a great week, Motivational Millennials!